The thing that sets hip-hop apart from most other genres of music is that its rise is very closely tied to the thug life, with several artists using their music to gain fame and notoriety in the hopes of building a better life. The Chicago rap scene is one of the most influential and iconic in the industry, playing an instrumental role in the rise of drill rap. But the area also has a terrifying reputation for being a place riddled with gang activity, and artists from Chicago often using their lyrics to get messages across. Some of them have been so shocking that listeners have actually wondered, did that really happen? FBG Wooski, Computers. FBG Wooski might not necessarily be a name that everyone immediately recognizes, but to anyone familiar with everything going down in Chiraq, this is a name that has popped up a bunch of times over the years. He will also pop up a lot of times as I go through this list, usually as one of the guys dissed by the ops. I will talk a little bit about some of the stuff he has done in the past, but for right now, let's focus on one of his more controversial tracks. Computers dropped back in January 2018 and was quickly included in the conversation for some of the best diss tracks of all time. Wooski's a member of the Gangster Disciples, and anyone who knows their Chiraq history knows that the GD has been beefing with the Black Disciples for years. He was one of Lil Durk and King Von's main ops, and the rapper had absolutely no issues in going after the members of O-Block in his tracks. There were multiple moments in Computers where Wooski disrespected his ops, but these lyrics really stood out. Fo Nem stood over J Money and put 4 in his grill for real. Now go ask Lil Boo how that hot shit feel. The lyrics might not seem like much, but a couple of names stand out. J Money was a member of O-Block before being shot in the head in early September 2013 when he was just 21 years old. Money was pretty important to O-Block as a whole, acting as one of the heavies for the crew and taking care of business for them. Money allegedly had a baby on the way at the time of his shooting, and all of O-Block took his death really hard. After learning of what had happened, noted rapper and O-Block member Lil Durk had tweeted, "Rip J Money, we just lost a savage who put tears in family eye, you ain't never forgotten." O-Block also adopted the nickname Money Gang to honor the death of one of their own. The Gangster Disciples would occasionally diss Money in their songs, but Wooski's attacking Computers was pretty shocking nonetheless. However, Money wasn't the only man disrespected in the track, because Wooski also went after Lil Boo. Boo was one of the most important members in the formation of Team 600, or just 600, which was a set of the Black Disciples. Boo had spent most of 2012 to 2014 in prison because he just could not stay out of trouble, and when he got out in early April 2015, he was shot down near his own hood. These lyrics were pretty shocking by themselves, but all of Computers was filled with bars that took shots at Wooski's ops. A choice phrase like "boy, go block," and more focused disses like "you can get did like OD," which insulted the memory of young OD Perry, a beloved Black Disciple member, proved that Wooski had absolutely no problems in getting all up in his ops' faces. All of that would come back to haunt him later though, as Wooski would be one of 6 people shot, taking a bullet to the head while attending a friend's funeral in October 2018. The rapper would survive the shooting against all odds, and has mostly kept a low profile since then, which is probably the smart thing to do. That doesn't make him any less dangerous though, because odds are that if Wooski decides to get active again, he will be Chiraq's most savage gangster disciple once more. Lil Durk and OTF Nunu, OC. Unlike Computers, OC by OTF Nunu and Lil Durk did not target any specific ops when it dropped in 2014, but gave listeners a look at the violent life he led as a gang member and just why ops would be better off not screwing with him and his crew. The very first line of the track, "Smoke Ops Out of Vega," was a reference to how the crew took care of business. It was alleged that the Black Disciples would often take out their ops while riding in a Chevy Vega, while a 40 Ruger leaving with facelifts was in reference to a 40 caliber Ruger that they arguably carried to avoid being caught slipping. In case you didn't know, caught slipping is a phrase used by a lot of Chicago rappers, which means to be caught off guard, especially in a bad situation. From the very beginning, OC was all about what it was like running with the Black Disciples. Between talking about the Vega and the 40 Ruger, both Durk and Nunu would also refer to their piece as Nina, calling it a problem solver. But most interesting of all was the fact that they actually referred to how they took out their ops on the streets as well, rapping "do a hit with 4, 6, catch a op, then we out," referring to how the BD would pull up with 4 to 6 members, take out an op, and then bounce. These are just a handful of bars that stand out in the track, but all of OC is all about how Durk and Nunu are always ready to take down their ops, while making references to OTF 300, which has had close ties to the Black Disciples for a long time. The entire track is a warning and an attack on all of the Black Disciples ops. The video for OC dropped on May 28, 2014, just a couple of days before Nunu would be shot dead on the 31st of the same month. According to early reports coming out of the shooting, he was one of 4 people killed in shootings over a 12-hour time frame. Lil Durk Durk hadn't just been one of Nunu's collaborators, but they were real-life cousins as well, which meant this death was really close to home for the rapper. The media reported that Nunu, whose real name was MacArthur Swindle, had just been chilling in his SUV when someone walked up to his car and fired off shots. The rapper then ended up driving his car into a storefront window before being found dead at the scene at 3:25 p.m. on the 31st. At first, the shooting seemed to be pretty random, but a police spokeswoman soon chalked up Nunu's death to gang-related violence, despite the young rapper's aunt stating that her nephew had nothing to do with any gangs. In the meanwhile, Durk has continued to focus on his music career, dropping his 8th studio album, Almost Healed, in May 2023, which debuted in the 3rd spot on the Billboard 200. Lil Mark, No Competition. So you remember how I said that a lot of people thought FBG Wooskie's Computers was one of the greatest diss tracks of all time? Well, some would argue that Lil Mark's No Competition should also be a part of the same conversation. Some might even say that No Competition is the better diss track of the two. The crazy thing about this track is that it is not the first but the second Gangster Disciple retaliation to Lil Durk's track titled Competition. In that track, Durk dissed guys like Lil J and FBG Duck, and the chorus of the song repeatedly featured him saying, "These shots to my ops, these shots to my ops." The first response from the Gangster Disciples came from Lil J, who had been dissed in the original track. Jay used the same beat to release Competition Domination before Lil Mark stepped up and dropped No Competition, which was on a whole other level. Mark went after former members of Team 600 and OTF while destroying his ops for taking Shondale Tuka Gregory's name and driving it into the dirt, making phrases like "smoking Tuka" and "Tuka Pack" synonymous with pot. The first verse of the track alone was enough to make it one of the greatest disses ever. Baldy Pack, Mosky Pack, Tasky Pack, Lil Rob Pack, wake up, ate a bowl of tricks while I was blowing on D-Thang, riding down to Steve Drive, think I'm finna OD. Took a trip to Lele Walketa, man, she throat me. In just 8 lines, Lil Mark managed to diss 10 people who had been associated with the Black Disciples or were tight with Lil Durk before their deaths. That list included people like O.D. Perry and L.A. Capone, just to name a couple. The rapper wasn't done with the Black Disciples though, as later in the song Mark would rap, "Catch you in broad day, leave him like J Money." If you remember from earlier, J Money had rolled with the BDs before catching a bullet in September 2013. If all of that wasn't crazy enough, Mark also managed to threaten anyone who threw shade at Young Money 051 and give Tuka a shout out. Lil Mark dropped No Competition on March 25th, 2014, but he would never get the chance to see just how much people would love the track. Just 3 days after the video for No Competition would go live, Mark would be shot while standing near a bus stop when a guy in an SUV would pull up and open fire. The music video did feature shots at guys like Lil Reese, who rolled with the ops, but at the time it was unclear if his death had anything to do with gang activity. But considering the fact that he had just dropped one of the greatest diss tracks of all time and insulted several dead ops, a gang wanting to get even makes a lot of sense. FYBJ Maine, Long Live Duck. FYBJ Maine can be best categorized as a renegade Black Disciple because while he was once associated with the gang, he actively targets members of the BDs. His lack of allegiance to the crew was well known to most, but still received a large spotlight when he dropped Long Live Duck in September 2020. The track was included on Maine's album, which was aptly titled Duck's Revenge. The title is a reference to FBG Duck, a prominent member of the Gangster Disciples who had been shot down in broad daylight the previous month in August. One of the most repeated bars in the track was, "I grew up Black Disciple, for Duck I'm cracking trays," which basically seemed to suggest he was acting as a renegade BD for Duck. If that wasn't enough, Maine took shots at specific members of the Black Disciples in his lyrics. A couple of the names that pop up will probably be familiar to you by now, with bars like J Money Special Bitch, Get Your Face Popped, BDK for Queen Von, his ops, or might take a on Lil Grave, I hope he rot. He didn't even stop there though, also taking shots at guys like OTF Nunu, Lil Boo, and T-Roy, all of whom had been associated with the Black Disciples, continuing the trend of rappers dissing their ops by focusing on deceased gang members. It kinda makes sense why Maine would go after his ops so brazenly in the wake of Duck's death. As I had mentioned earlier, the rapper had been shot down in broad daylight, right out on the street. Stuff like this just did not happen that often at all, and the fact that it happened just a little while after he dropped the music video for Dead was pretty telling. The track had seen Duck drag O.D. Perry and T-Roy through the mud as he rapped. Said I wasn't gonna diss the dead, and okay, I did it, but T-Roy and O.D. them dead. After Duck's death, Chicago law enforcement firmly believed that he had been targeted as a direct consequence of him insulting members of the Black Disciples in the music video. There may have been other factors at play as well, but regardless, we know that Duck's allies took his death really hard, leading to tracks like Long Live Duck. Maine hasn't been up to much since releasing that track, mostly just appearing in interviews and releasing one album titled Nightmare on O Block in late March 2022. Guessing from the title of the album, I'm sure you can figure out that it is another shot at his ops, with Maine doing his best Freddy Krueger impression on the cover. TW Lil Twan, 62 Dead Ops. When it comes to diss tracks, TW Lil Twan's 62 Dead Ops is probably one of the most slept on songs. In just a couple of minutes, Twan managed to diss a number of notable names from O Block and Team 600 in a track stacked with one insult after another. Lyrics like Lil Steve got caught trying to take a or more specific disses like T-Roy got hit, why the f he was trying to learn, they tried to run, but he wind up tripping on that big shirt. These are just a couple of examples, but over the course of the track, Twan managed to diss other guys like Lil Boo and L.A. Capone, and say stuff like, J Money, I on his grave in back-to-back bars. Almost every line in the track was an insult aimed at a member of O Block, the Black Disciples, Team 600, or some other crew. When you look at 62 Dead Ops objectively, rivals tracks like No Competition or Computers, but it still manages to hit different because it didn't become nearly as popular as those two tracks. That gives 62 Dead Ops a really raw, underground feel that makes all the disses and insults feel even more personal. You'd probably be able to find lyrics for every song on this list, but you will be hard-pressed to find any for Twan's track. That's how low it flew under the radar. Like a few songs I've spoken about so far, this track also continued the trend of Ops dissing the Black Disciples and their allies. Now let's go back in time for a little bit. The TW in TW Lil Twan stands for Taekwon World. The TW is a set of the Gangster Disciples, kind of like how Team 600 is for the Black Disciples. The crew mainly operates on the south side of Chicago and took on the name after 13-year-old Taekwon Tyler was murdered at the hands of Jarrow City back in 2012. Strangely enough, Jarrow City is another set of the Gangster Disciples. In a lot of cases, something like this going down could and should have led to a lot of issues between both GD sets, but as things stand, JC and TW are allies. The fact that Taekwon's killer was sentenced to 55 years in prison in 2015 probably played a big role in smoothing things over between both sets. Anyway, Taekwon World has been beefing with O Block for a while now, which is not surprising considering its close ties to the Gangster Disciples. Lil Twan's 62 Dead Ops seems to have been the highlight of his musical career so far, piggybacking off the success of other GD diss tracks to create another immensely controversial song to add to the crew's catalog. Lil Durk and Pooh Shiesty, Should Have Ducked. Alright, I have been talking about the Gangster Disciples and their tracks for a while, so let me give their ops a little more shine too. Lil Durk track featuring Pooh Shiesty titled Should Have Ducked is all about dragging FBG Duck through the mud after his death. If you remember from earlier, Duck had been shot down in broad daylight just a few days after dropping a music video in which he insulted O.D. Perry and T-Roy, both of whom had been members of O Block. The track, which dropped in late January 2021, immediately became controversial because Durk pulled no punches when talking about Duck in the song, even making clear references to the rapper's death. He rapped, "Ain't no quick run to the store, they pop out, fire you up. I told my PO through the gate that I get high as f. She asked me how high do I get. I told her high as duck." He wouldn't stop there, referring to Durk in the track once more, saying, before he died, his ass a goofy, now he famous and shit. But just insulting the dead wasn't enough for Durk. Shiesty, as Should Have Ducked, would also make a reference to FBG Wooskie's near-death experience from 2018, when he was shot in the head at a friend's funeral, saying, he survived one to the head, but it f***ed up his body. You think he off a 8 or read the way that nodding? All the tracks on this list are very personal, but this one took things a step further because FBG Duck's mother actually got involved. Back in December 2020, Durk had previewed the track which led to Duck's mother going off on him when she learned he was dissing her dead son. In a furious response, she said, "Y'all really showing y'all rich off mentioning my son. Y'all rich off mentioning Tuka, show your craft. Do something else besides dissing music." The entire video was pretty interesting because off camera, someone could be heard trying to reason with Duck's mother, suggesting that Durk was still hurting after King Von's death. That didn't do much to calm her down, but the reasoning made a lot of sense. Durk and Von had grown up together and come up in the industry almost side by side. When Von was ready to make it to the big time, Durk hadn't hesitated in signing him to his label. The fact that Durk was a little older and already somewhat established in the hip-hop game meant that he was also a mentor of sorts to Von. Von had died on November 6, 2020, which meant that when Durk and Shiesty dropped Should Have Ducked in early 2021, only a couple of months had passed and Durk was probably still hurting. That doesn't excuse the things Durk said about Duck in the track, but it gives some context to what the rapper was going through when he was putting the song together. As I had mentioned earlier, Durk has mostly focused on his music over the last couple of years, releasing his 8th studio album in March 2023. Shiesty, in the meanwhile, has also been pretty busy, working on a couple of solo and compilation projects, but he is nowhere on the same level as his Should Have Ducked collaborator. FBG Duck and Ruga, Exposing Me remix. FBG Duck has popped up a bunch of times so far, so it is only fitting that he also came up with a diss track for the ages. The Exposing Me remix featuring Roga was released as an insult to the members of O Block and Team 600. The track dropped in early February 2019 and was a slap in the face of the ops. Early on, a bar by Ruga suggests that O Block only exists because of them, because they took out Odie Perry, who O Block is named after. The crazy thing is that this isn't really a diss, it's a fact. Perry was murdered by a member of the Gangster Disciples, and that's how O Block was born. But that is only the beginning. The song continues to escalate when Duck takes over for his first verse and raps. T-Roy ain't get shot inside his head, but he ain't make it though. They got so many dead niggas, I don't know who to smoke. Not only does Duck suggest that FBG Wooski is tougher than T-Roy because he survived a shot to the head, he further insults his ops by pointing out how many members of their crew have died recently. Ruga would then get in on the act, taking shots at Lil Boo and Lil Steve, with Duck also following up by throwing shade at guys like J Money. I don't know if you have noticed yet, but a handful of names keep popping up in every diss track written by a Gangster Disciple, almost as if the crew knows how to push their ops buttons. The final line of the song would include a parting shot at Memo 600, as Dirk rapped, "Memo, stop wearing that fake out your daddy van." So Memo 600 is the original artist of Exposing Me, which Duck then chose to remix. The insult was also really specific, because Memo had allegedly been accused of wearing fake designer brands on the regular. Duck would go on to release a bunch of tracks in the year or so that followed. Most of them would go relatively unnoticed with the exception of Dead. And well, I have already told you why that stirred up trouble for the rapper. As a matter of fact, Duck would only drop one music video between 2018 and his death in 2020, and that would be for, you guessed it, Dead. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on when it came to the rapper's death. Beyond being shot as many as 21 times in broad daylight, there were also rumors that King Von had put out a hit on him, with the bounty starting off at $50,000 before being doubled to $100,000. There were even reports that Von had bought custom necklaces for the member of O Block once Duck had been taken out. As of April 2023, 6 men have been charged with the murder. Conversely, Roga has managed to maintain a relatively low profile, mostly just popping up in tracks here and there over the last couple of years. Taking a look at his career so far, and there is no doubt that Exposing Me has been the highlight, because for better or worse, sharing the spotlight with FBG Duck was worth it. There's no word on whether Memo 600 still wears fake brands or not. Drilla Beatbox Remix. Spot 'em Got 'em's track Beatbox was remixed by a ton of artists after it dropped in April 2020. Artists like Young M.A., Lil Yachty, and DayBaby are just some of the names who tried to give Beatbox their own spin. But a remix that went unnoticed by a lot of people was the one by Drilla, featuring YMN Wu. There isn't anything all that impressive about Drilla's remix. The beat is tight, and we have Spot 'em to thank for that. And Drilla's flow is smooth, but it is far from perfect. Like so many other tracks, Drilla's take on Beatbox is also all about how he deals with ops, with the music video featuring tons of weapons and money in pretty much every frame. However, the reason this still feels different is because Drilla was arguably one of the most dangerous men in the Chicago rap scene just a couple of years ago. But more than that, he was also truly fearless. When he dropped 51 Dead Ops back in late 2018, he went after pretty much everyone, living up to the title of his track and naming 51 Dead Ops and insulting as many of them as he could along the way. But despite all of that, Drilla has escaped real trouble for the most part. It hasn't been all smooth sailing though, because a little more than a year ago, video footage of the rapper being shot at made its way online. Luckily for Drilla, he wasn't seriously hurt, just taking a bullet to the leg. Drilla rolled with the 051 Young Money crew, which has long held a reputation for taking out ops and causing chaos through violence. When the crew actually started to focus a little more on the music again, Drilla emerged as one of the more exciting voices, thanks in large part to 51 Dead Ops. He has kept a relatively low profile as of late, but between the occasional viral track and unexpected remix, Drilla can pop up pretty much any time. G Herbo, Crazy. Crazy was the third track on G Herbo's fourth mixtape titled Strictly For My Fans. Unlike pretty much every other entry on this list, Crazy doesn't really aim to diss or insult anyone. Instead, it gives Herbo an opportunity to talk about the death of one of his close friends. The lyric, "That night we lost Kobe on the 8 block, had that Glock beside him," is a reference to Jacoby Herring, who was called Kobe by those who knew him and was just 21 years old at the time of his death in 2013. According to reports, Kobe was shot multiple times on August 10, 2013, just east of the intersection of 79th Streets and Yates Boulevard in South Chicago. It was also reported that Kobe was leaving a party that Herbo was still at when he was shot down. Both men were super tight, and Herbo struggled to come to terms with the death of his friend. In a November 2015 interview, the rapper talked a little bit about how both men became friends. He said, "He was just one of the cool-ass, low-key getting high with the and I was just hooping and being who I was, funny as hell, just with people. We just connected. A couple of years after his friend's death, the rapper would release Ballin' Like I'm Kobe, which was the last mixtape he dropped before Strictly For My Fans. The fact that Herbo dedicated an entire mixtape to his friend but still made references to him in the one that followed proved just how important Kobe had been to him. Driven by that pain, Ballin' Like I'm Kobe received great reviews, as critics praised the mixtape for how raw and powerful the tracks on it were, with one of them even saying, "Herb's Ballin' Like I'm Kobe paints something pretty close to an audible masterpiece. And beauty is pain, right?" Skipping forward in time a little bit, Herbo has had to deal with a fair amount of legal troubles over the last few years. Back in December 2020, the rapper, along with multiple associates, was indicted on 14 federal charges. These charges included conspiracy to commit wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Apparently, the rapper and his associates had used stolen identification to charge exotic services worth well over $1 million, dating all the way back to 2016. Basically, Herbo used stolen credit cards to buy himself a bunch of cool stuff. The indictment stated that the defendants got trips of private jets, limousine rides, crazy car rentals, and Herbo even bought 2 exotic puppies from a dealer in Michigan back in 2017. Things were looking pretty bleak for the rapper and his crew because the most serious charges filed against them carried up to 20 years in prison, if not more. In late July 2023, Herbo pleaded guilty in a federal court in Springfield, Massachusetts. He was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and for making false statements. But because he pled guilty, prosecutors knocked off several counts of aggravated identity theft. The rapper also agreed to cough up $140,000, which was apparently the amount that he personally used in the $1.5 million scam. But that doesn't mean Herbo is in the clear, not by any means whatsoever. His sentencing is scheduled for November 7th, 2023, and the rapper actually faces a maximum of 25 years in prison. In a statement, the acting U.S. attorney said, "Mr. Wright, Herbo, used stolen account information as his very own unlimited funding source, using victims' payment cards to finance an extravagant lifestyle and advance his career. As things stand, it'll be another few weeks before we know Herbo's fate." And that's our video. If you enjoyed it, check one of these out too. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.